April 14, 1865. America was celebrating the end of the Civil War. The nation had finally begun to heal after 4 years of bloodshed. That night, President Lincoln went to the theater to relax. Inside a crowded playhouse, laughter filled the air. No one suspected that death was waiting in the shadows. A single gunshot would soon change the nation forever. The president was dying, and his killer had vanished into the night. This is the story of the 12 days that followed, one of the greatest manhunts in American history. By the spring of 1865, the Civil War was finally coming to an end. The Union had achieved a hard-fought victory over the Confederacy. General Robert E. Lee had surrendered just days earlier. For the first time in 4 years, the guns had gone silent. President Abraham Lincoln had led the nation through its darkest years. He now faced an even greater challenge: rebuilding a broken country. Lincoln believed in healing the nation, not punishing the South. He spoke of unity, forgiveness, and a new beginning for all Americans. But not everyone shared his vision of peace. Many in the South viewed the Union's victory as a humiliating defeat. Bitterness and resentment simmered beneath the surface of peace. Some believed the Confederacy's cause was not truly over. Among those who refused to accept defeat was a famous young actor. His name was John Wilkes Booth, and he had already begun planning something unthinkable. John Wilkes Booth was one of the most famous actors in America. He came from a celebrated family of Shakespearean performers. Audiences adored his talent, charm, and striking stage presence. But behind the spotlight, Booth held extreme political views. He was a passionate supporter of the Confederacy. He deeply opposed Lincoln's policies toward the South. As the war turned against the South, Booth grew increasingly radical. At first, he plotted to kidnap the president, not kill him. He believed capturing Lincoln could help the Confederacy's cause. But as the war ended, his plans took a darker turn. Lee's surrender shattered any hope of a Confederate victory. For Booth, kidnapping no longer seemed like enough. He began plotting something far more extreme: assassination. He gathered a small group of fellow conspirators to help him. Their plan targeted not just the president, but his top officials. Booth would strike at Ford's Theater, where Lincoln planned to attend. The date was set, April 14, 1865. On the night of the assassination, Ford's Theater was packed. President Lincoln arrived with his wife and guests. The audience rose and cheered as he took his seat. Lincoln settled in to enjoy a comedic play. Outside, Booth moved quietly through the theater halls. He knew the building and its layout extremely well. As an actor, he had performed on this very stage before. Booth slipped past security with practiced confidence. He approached the door of the president's private box. At around 10:15 p.m., he made his move. Booth quietly entered the box behind the president. He raised a small pistol just inches from Lincoln's head. A single shot rang out through the theater. Screams erupted as the president slumped forward. Booth leaped from the box onto the stage below. He shouted a defiant phrase as he landed. Then he fled through the back of the theater. A horse waited for him in the alley outside. Booth mounted quickly and rode off into the night. Inside the theater, panic and confusion spread rapidly. Doctors rushed to the president's side, but his wound was severe. Lincoln was carried to a house across the street. Throughout the night, the nation prayed for his survival. Early the next morning, President Lincoln passed away. The news spread across the country within hours. America was plunged into shock, grief, and outrage. And somewhere out in the darkness, the killer was still running. Within hours, the largest manhunt in American history began. Thousands of soldiers and detectives joined the search. Every road leading out of Washington was placed under watch. Booth had suffered a broken leg during his dramatic escape. He sought help from a local doctor along his escape route. That decision would later have serious consequences for the doctor. Booth was joined by a fellow conspirator during his escape. Together, they moved carefully through the Maryland countryside. They avoided main roads, sticking to quiet farmland and trails. Newspapers across the country published updates every single day. Reward posters offered enormous sums for Booth's capture. Detectives followed every possible lead, no matter how small. Farms, barns, and forests were searched again and again. Booth and his companion hid in dense woods for several days. They relied on sympathetic locals for food and shelter. Some believed in Booth's cause and were willing to help him hide. Others quietly reported suspicious activity to the authorities. The search expanded across Maryland and into Virginia. Booth eventually crossed the Potomac River under cover of darkness. He believed reaching Confederate territory meant safety. But Federal troops were closing in from every direction. Every day without capture only increased the nation's tension. 12 days after the assassination, a critical tip finally arrived. Booth's location had finally been discovered. In the early hours of April 26th, soldiers reached a quiet farm. Booth and his companion were hiding inside a tobacco barn. The soldiers quickly surrounded the building on all sides. Inside, Booth realized there was no way to escape. Commanders outside ordered him to surrender peacefully. Booth refused, declaring he would rather die than be captured. His companion eventually surrendered and stepped outside. Booth remained inside, alone and defiant. To force him out, soldiers set fire to the barn. Flames quickly spread through the dry wooden structure. Through the smoke, soldiers could see Booth's silhouette inside. Moments later, a single shot rang out from within the barn. Soldiers rushed forward as the flames continued to spread. They pulled Booth from the burning building, badly wounded. He was placed on the porch of a nearby farmhouse. Within hours, John Wilkes Booth was dead. The 12-day manhunt had finally come to an end. News of his death spread across the nation within hours. For many Americans, it brought a sense of long-awaited justice. Across the nation, mourning had already begun before Booth's death. Lincoln's body traveled by train through numerous American cities. Millions of Americans came out to witness the procession. Many had never seen the president in person before. For many, this was their final chance to say goodbye. Lincoln was remembered as the leader who preserved the Union. He had guided the nation through its darkest and bloodiest years. His vision for reconciliation now faced an uncertain future. Without Lincoln's leadership, the path to healing grew more difficult. The assassination left a lasting scar on the nation's history. Lincoln became a symbol of sacrifice and national unity. Today, his legacy remains deeply woven into American identity. More than 160 years later, his story endures. The tragedy at Ford's Theater is still remembered vividly today. One gunshot ended the life of a president, but it could not erase the legacy he left behind. The 12-day hunt that followed became one of history's most famous manhunts. It captivated and united a grieving nation in its pursuit of justice. A single night that forever changed the course of the United States.